Good morning, everyone. How is everybody? Yay. Isn't this fun being out here? Labor Day weekend, we want to thank all our guests that have traveled from far and from near this morning. Thank you for coming all the way out to Laurelwood for our Sunday service here. It's always so special to have this celebration here. Well, our topic this morning, ego, friend or foe, sounds like a classic challenge in a duel, doesn't it? Foe or friend, and who wins most of the time? Ego, right? Yogananda described the ego as the soul identified with the body in its small sense. What? I am male, I am female, I am tall, I am short, I am rich, I am poor. And then what does the ego try and do? We try to always change those outer circumstances, right? We try and get taller or shorter, right? We wear heels or we don't wear heels. We, change the color of our hair. We do all sorts of things to respond to the ego. But what our reading this morning and our affirmation is reminding us that we are not this ego. We're not attached to this body and who we think we are, but we're something so much more deeper. And when we tune into that, we can feel for, what's the affirmation today? Power. We can feel His power, God's power, Divine Mother's power flowing through our veins, flowing through our mind, through our consciousness, filling us with His Spirit, not this small consciousness that we have. I want to read this really fun dialogue from the Gita, and I have a copy for you. This is from the Gita. It's entitled, Who Are You? And this is a really fun dialogue, so follow along. It's a little bit long, but it really puts a point on our topic this morning. A young man named Naresh met a saint, and the saint asked him who he was, and the youth answered, I am Naresh. Who are you? Asked the saint again. Naresh, thinking perhaps the saint hadn't heard him, said, My name is Naresh. Yes, but who are you? Naresh, puzzled, replied, My father's name is Ramduta. I live in Delhi. I'm an accountant. Yes, but who are you? Persisted the saint. The young man puzzled over this question. Was the saint hard of hearing? Was he perhaps growing old and a little bit senile? Well, if you don't know, said the saint with a smile, maybe it's good you came to me. By now the young man was thoroughly bewildered. Still, he felt a certain peace in the saint's presence and returned to him many times. He didn't really know why. Gradually, however, he came to think, can I really define myself in such a limited way as to say that I'm an accountant? He began to think, I'm not what I do. I'm a young man with many interests, including that of visiting the saint, though I do so for reasons I don't fully understand. Who are you? The saint asked him again one day. By now the older man seemed to the younger one not only perfectly normal, but maybe even wise. I don't know who I really am, said Naresh. That's better, exclaimed the saint. Now then, think about it again. Who are you? Well, thought the young man, I have a name, a family, but am I really any of those things? Suddenly it dawned on him, I'm a soul in search of itself. His body was still young, but he knew it would age in time. Even now he was the same person inside that he had been as a little child. The body had changed, but he hadn't. Therefore he realized he was not the body. He introspected further. His understanding had changed since he met the saint, but he was still the same person inside. His personality had changed, but something in his consciousness had remained the same. Slowly he came to realize that he himself was a point of inner perception from which he merely observed these changes, but didn't define himself in terms of any of them. That which changes, he realized, cannot be what I am. I am that something within that remains unchanged, that simply observes every change. Thus he came to identify himself more and more with his soul. One day he said to the Guru, "I know who I am, but there are no words with which to speak of it." The saint, hearing those words, only smiled. Later on, the saint said, "Now that words fail you, there is much that we can communicate." Wisdom begins with the knowledge that we are not this body or personality. We are the immortal soul. And that again is from the essence of the Gita. And that's what we're talking about today. That's what we've been celebrating this weekend. We're celebrating community. We're celebrating something. Oh, okay. Yeah, great. We're sharing the reading. We're celebrating. Our masters came to remind us of that, to remind us that we're more than just this body, that if we tune into them, we can feel for their power, we can feel for their love, we can feel for their joy flowing through our veins. We talk about the energization exercises every time we do a class. Why are they so important? Because they help us to tune into that energy that's greater than our own, that cosmic energy that we can actually learn to draw in. And then by the use of our will, bring it to the different body parts. But we're not just energizing our muscles by doing these exercises. We're reminding ourselves who we are. O infinite spirit, recharge this body with thy cosmic energy, this mind with thy concentration, this soul with thy ever-new joy. O eternal youth of body and mind, abide in me forever and forever. We're coming back home. That divine memory, we're awakening that Sanskrit word that I love so much, that smriti, divine memory, awakening to who we are. And it's not that we can't do anything, we can't make any choices on our own, but Yogananda always said, pray, I will reason, I will act. But he prays, guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. See the difference, always drawing in that consciousness. And it's not that we become passive because we're asking God to come into our lives. Swami Kriyananda once wanted to test that. He was giving a sermon, I believe it was at Sunday service, and he said, okay, God will speak through me. And he just stood there. And it was like a good 2 minutes and nobody was speaking. We have to act. We have to engage, right? That's why we always say the path is a combination of the Guru's grace, God's grace, but then our effort. We have to act, but we need to remember to pray, open ourselves to the consciousness of the masters. And that's why we just come back every Sunday to remind ourselves of that greatness that we are. An environment, we've been talking about environment a lot. Yesterday was such a fun day with talking more about community and then having a Seva day together. Again, going beyond who we think we are. Going past that and sharing. When you share energies like we did in our Seva Day yesterday, it's not just about us anymore, is it? Right? We're giving to something, to another cause. We're giving to a greater cause. We're joining our energies together. There's a power in that. In meditation together, doing our spiritual practices together, as we talked about yesterday morning, the study, Michael Gornick reminded us of play, how important that is. And that's what we're doing all those things this weekend to remind us of that. But let's remember that power of God is always with us, opening ourselves up to him and then coming through us. Feel him flowing through you, through everything you do. He's right there. He's waiting for us to open our hearts, and he will enter and take charge of our lives. So God bless you all. Daiva will share now.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be together. This is the 5th Labor Day that we have shared out here at Laurelwood, and it's the 5th time we've held Sunday service out here. And it's just, there's a magic in it. It's been a really precious weekend so far, and there's more to come. This is kind of a halfway point in the middle of the connecting. The topic today, the topic is the spirit of community. The topics today is ego, friend or foe, and power. And it's interesting how those got matched up, the ego, friend or foe, and power. You know, opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love isn't indifference. The opposite of love is fear. We are terrified that somehow our connection with life is superficial and tentative, is trivial and easily broken. And so we shield ourselves from all of the unpleasantness, all of the possible disasters, and we shrink ourselves down increasingly the more we're protective. Community is one of the greatest gifts of this age. Yogananda came, and those who have seen the movie Awake, we saw it again last night, you feel the radiant power of this soul. It's one individual, it's like Christ, one individual who has awakened to the presence of Spirit as their only reality, and the causative power that moves through their being in upliftment and blessing of others. And yoga is in this country and reawakened globally because of the lineage that you see up here and because of the life of Paramahansa Yogananda and his offering of his thoughts, of his actions, moment by moment by moment, in service to the blessing and awakening of others. And not only to be a radiant example of what it can look like, but to give us the tools, the techniques, the resources to find that within ourselves. It's not enough to see it someplace else. One of the greatest gifts that he brought, one of the greatest techniques of awakening, one of the greatest understandings that he brought was the understanding of community. Not community in the sense that most people live it, because we're all connected to family, we're all connected to neighborhood, we're all connected, at a molecular level. The physicists even say that you cannot move one atom without affecting every other. So we're always in community. But most individuals within community are pointed outward into satisfaction. There's a really good friend of mine. He's actually been a hero of ours since we came out here to Laurelwood. And he's been a major force for us being here and for holding the understanding of uplifted community in this valley long before we came here. And he's very talented. He just got back from a 2-month job over east of Klamath Falls. He does an environmental cleanup company. And he was telling me that as soon as he got back, he and his wife, they went out and bought a boat, an 18-foot boat. And they traveled all over the West Coast and had a great time. They were just having a lot of fun playing together. And then he said that they actually took this 18-foot open cockpit boat across from LA to the Channel Islands, 26 miles. Think about being in a little cork. And he said it was a great challenge. And he said next year we're going back and we're going to go to all the Channel Islands. And this is how it works. We feel the power of our own nature. And then we feel it in relationship to life. And we feel that we are connected, that we can be a force, and that no matter what life gives us or throws at us, we are in control. We can handle this. But then what happens is the appetite for that rush of outer connection simply drives desire. There's nothing wrong with having an 18-foot boat, nothing wrong with being a cork on the ocean, nothing wrong with going out there. But it was more and I don't know that this is his truth, but it just reminded me of the process that most of us go through. That we find ourselves in a place where some divine quality is awakened within us. And instead of internalizing it, instead of going, God, that was such a rich experience, we just want more of it. We keep, we go farther and farther and farther afield until we finally extend past our point of divine connection. And we break. We have to learn And community is one of the great resources for that. We have to learn how to expand our aura, expand our sense of power, until we realize that it's divine power, but the source of it is not in ourselves. The source of it is in our attunement. And the capacity to live in that is through our attunement with the source and have it flow through us. And instead of chasing after places where we can exercise ourselves, because Master said, he said so clearly, this world is a terrible machine for those who do not know how to live in it, that will tear you limb from limb. But if you know how to find the source, if you can get in touch inside, our power, our sense of ourselves, our relationship to eternity and infinity just grows day by day, moment by moment. As we become still instead of more restless, as we become confident, we become more still. And that power radiates. I'm looking at Nate. Sorry, Nate. I'm going to tell a little story on you here just a moment. Because he just came back from Africa. How old are you, sir? 15. He went to Africa with the Audubon Society, and they did a major, was it 2 weeks you were out there? They were out in the outback of Africa for 2 weeks, northern South Africa, and they were exploring the relationship of wildlife to its surroundings and to some degree to them. And they were sleeping the entire time in canvas. And in the morning, every morning, they would find the tracks of hyenas and leopards and baboons walking through their camp, and the growl of lions, the snarl of lions on the outskirts of their camp. And then, how many nights did you spend out? 2 nights they slept out under the stars. They went away from their base camp. They went away from everything safe. They went away from everything familiar. And they camped out under the stars. Now, all of us think that, we've heard the rumor that if you just have a campfire, you'll keep wildlife away. And he has been willing to disabuse us of that illusion. He says that they're not that afraid of the fire. You don't build that big a fire in the first place. But they slept out. Their security was through awareness. All night long, and the guys with the guns went to sleep, and they left the 15-year-olds to tend the fire with the air horn and the alertness and the knowledge that if they nodded or ignored the issue, likely somebody, if not all of them, were going to get eaten. And he talked about, and it's interesting, he talked about those nights as being the most poignant of the trip. We need to know that power is ours. We need to know that we can do things that can change our relationship to life, that nothing, if we stay alert and connected and aware and responsive, there's nothing that can overwhelm us. Community keeps us from getting too self-involved. It keeps us from operating within our own. It's so easy to slip. There's a great story of the minister who was completely, he was losing his ego in the sense of wonder at the grandness of life and the grandness of spirit. And he was at the altar and he was just praying, Lord, I am nothing. I am no one. I am no one. I am nothing. And the assistant minister saw that and got caught up in it. He felt the expansiveness of it. And he knelt beside the minister and he's there, I am nothing, I am nothing. And they're both just lost in it. And the janitor comes by and he looks over and he too is just completely taken by the sense of, I am just part of this vastness. I am nothing, I am nothing. And after a couple of minutes, the assistant minister nudged the minister. He looked over and nudged him and says, look who thinks he's nothing. It's so easy to slip off the dime. It's so easy to miss the point, to get caught back in our littleness. Our friends in spiritual community, because that's what Yogananda brought, it's spiritual community. It's being in relationship to others who are also making the same endeavor and can help us remember what we're trying to do. Unless we're walking on water, unless we cast no shadow, We're not free. Of course, ego's still operative. But is it, in fact, we can't even get rid of our ego. Have you ever tried? Have you ever tried to really get rid of your ego? How'd that work for you? Not very well. In fact, the harder you try, the more it digs in and asserts itself. The trick with all of this is not to try and cut off. In fact, you can't. You are individual. There will never be an expression of spirit that's not exactly like you. It's the identity with pettiness. It's the identity with smallness that we have to get rid of. And the best way we can do that is to expand our sense of identity. Yogananda spoke of family, but a community is just an extended family. He said the power of family is that we start to experience another's happiness. And we start to discover that another's happiness actually is more fulfilling than our own. This is how the soul grows. And then he said we should take that understanding and that experience and apply it to everyone else we meet. So we should take our wives, our children, our mothers, our fathers, our kids, whatever it is, and we should expand our sense of connection and sympathy and experience center to center of their reality and we will realize very quickly that their happiness is more important than our own. But then we should expand that, and community makes it so easy. And the larger the community and the more tight-knit that community, the more interactive that community, the more is possible there. This is a remarkable thing that's happening out here, but it's only a part of a tidal wave. And we're so hungry for community that we'll even do electronic community and spend hours and hours and hours involved in something that's just digital. There's no substance there. It's just imagery. And one friend of mine, he says, every time I go on Facebook, I feel like I've been amazified. It's like it's there to just be sensational. But real life is sensational at such a deep and subtle and profound level. It's so far beyond the outer expressions. It's in meditation that we start to experience the real power of our own lives, the real power of our own nature. Yogananda wrote a poem. He wrote many things. This is from Whispers from Eternity, his book of prayer demands and poems. And he's talking about samadhi, that time when you went deep enough into stillness that he found himself connected with every single thing, every single person. He says, samadhi, that state of union, that state of expanding the sense of ego, the sense of identity to infinity. Samadhi but extends my conscious realm beyond the limits of the mortal frame to farthest boundary of eternity where I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. All space like an iceberg floats within my mental sea, colossal container I of all things made, of all things made. And then he wraps it up. He says, spotless is my mental sky. We have to go past our fears, our limitations, our sense of, oh my God, it's never going to work. And listen and attune to the flow of spirit guiding our lives. And even when it looks impossible, to offer ourselves increasingly into the grace of spirit. It looked like it was never going to work for Christ. And it even looked like it, especially when he was up on the cross. But he never wavered. He never backed off. He never shrank back. Oh my gosh. I mean, he had a moment where he would have preferred a different script. There's no question. But he said, your will, not mine. And it's only because of that cross. It's only because of the absolute self-offering that his message and his vibration were able to transform the consciousness, not just of a few people around him, but of tens of millions of people in every generation across 2,000 years, and still going. Spotless is my mental sky. Spotless. Not fear, not concern, not restlessness. Spotless is my mental sky. Below, ahead, and high above. Subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. Eternity and I, one united ray, a tiny bubble of laughter. I am become the sea of mirth itself. Let's take a moment of silence together.